I still remember the smell of grease and rain that day, the kind that settles in the air after a long afternoon of fixing what refuses to stay fixed. The shop was closing early because of the storm, or maybe because no one wanted to be around the flickering lights and dripping ceiling any longer. I was halfway through tightening a bolt on a rusted bike when she walked in. Marina, my cousin, my father's older sister's daughter, older by almost 20 years, though she never seemed to wear time the way others did. She had that kind of calm that made everyone else suddenly aware of their own noise. "Still open?" she asked, leaning just inside the doorway. Her voice carried warmth, but something in it hinted at a fatigue that didn't come from the rain. "For you?" "Yeah," I said before thinking. I meant it lightly, a joke, a reflex, but she smiled in a way that made it sound heavier than I intended. She stepped closer, careful with her heels on the slick floor. A navy trench coat clung to her shoulders, and small drops of rain slid down her hair onto the collar. She set a coffee cup on the counter beside a pile of wrenches. "Thought you'd need this," she said. "You look like you've been in here since sunrise." I hadn't realized how long I'd been working until then. The coffee was lukewarm by the time I lifted it, but it felt like the kindest thing anyone had done all week. "I didn't know you were back in town," I said. "Just for a few days. Family things." She gave a small shrug, as if that explained everything. Then her gaze drifted over the shop, the scattered parts, the half-finished machines, the quiet hum of the fan. "You always liked fixing what's broken." "Guess so." She smiled again, but this time her eyes lingered on me. There was something unguarded in them. Not attraction, not exactly, but recognition. Like she saw through the jokes I usually hid behind. The silence stretched, soft but alive. I pretended to sip the coffee again, just to look away. My hands didn't know what to do. One wiped at a clean surface, the other tightened a bolt that didn't need tightening. "You still working on that old red bike?" she asked suddenly. "Yeah, the one Dad said was beyond saving." "I remember." She smiled, and the corners of her mouth trembled before settling. "You hated giving up on anything." Her tone wasn't teasing. It was more like she was saying it to herself. I nodded, unsure what to reply. The shop felt smaller with her in it, the air thicker, the ticking clock louder. She started tracing a finger along the dusty counter, stopping at a small metal charm I'd kept there, a keychain shaped like a compass. "You still carry this?" she asked. I looked up. "You gave me that." "I did," she said softly. "You were what, 15? 14? Something flickered in her expression, surprise, maybe, that I remembered so clearly. The storm outside had softened into a whisper by then, but neither of us moved. Her hand brushed against mine when she set the compass down, just barely, just enough to make me forget what I'd meant to say next. "Thank you for the coffee," I murmured. She nodded once, slow. "You're welcome." And then she left, the sound of the doorbell following her out, small, lonely, final. But that night, when I closed up the shop, the smell of rain still lingered, and I couldn't stop replaying the moment her fingers grazed mine. Light as static, real as memory. It shouldn't have meant anything. It did. 2 days later, she came back. It was late morning, sunlight spilling across the shop's dusty windows. I was sorting through spare parts, pretending not to expect anyone, though I'd already checked the doorway twice since opening. The bell above the door rang softly, that same note that had haunted me since the storm. "Hey," Marina said, a hesitant smile forming as she stepped inside. "Do you have a few minutes?" "My car's making that noise again." Her voice had the same composed tone, but her eyes, a little weary, softer this time, betrayed her calm. "Always got time," I said. She laughed lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You shouldn't say that to customers. Sounds like a promise." I didn't answer. Instead, I took her keys and walked out to where her car was parked. The heat outside wrapped around us. Cicadas droned in the trees like static. She stood nearby, watching me as I crouched by the hood, sleeves rolled up, tools in hand. For a while, neither of us spoke. Just the quiet clicks of metal and her slow footsteps circling behind me. I caught her reflection in the car's window, arms folded loosely, eyes down. "You've been busy," she said after a pause. "Trying to be," I replied. "Keeps my head from getting too loud." Her lips curved, almost sadly. I get that. The way she said it made me look up. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her face was tilted toward the trees, but her jaw had tightened, like she'd said too much. You okay? I asked. She blinked, then forced a small laugh. Yeah, just tired, that's all. But her hands betrayed her, fingers brushing at the edge of her sleeve, twisting the fabric. I noticed her nails were chipped, her ring finger bare. There was a loneliness about her that didn't show itself fully, but you could feel it in the pauses between her words. Like she wanted to speak, but didn't trust the air to hold it. When I finished tightening the last bolt, I stood and wiped my hands. She was closer than I'd realized, maybe just a few inches away. You still don't wear gloves? She said quietly, looking at the grease on my fingers. They make me feel clumsy. She gave a faint smile, her eyes flicking to mine. You were always stubborn. Her tone softened on the word always, and something about it pulled at me. That gentle, dangerous warmth that comes when someone remembers too much about you. I wanted to say something, ask if she was really fine, or if she just didn't want to talk. But her phone buzzed in her pocket. She stepped back, answering it quickly, her tone shifting to polite formality. By the time she hung up, the distance had returned. She thanked me, smiled, and turned toward the car door. Drive safe, I said. I will, she replied, then hesitated, one hand still on the door handle. You always notice things, don't you? I frowned slightly. What do you mean? She looked at me for a moment longer, the corners of her mouth twitching like she wanted to say more, then didn't. Nothing, she whispered. See you around. She drove off, leaving a faint scent of her perfume in the air, something soft, impossible to name. I stood there for a while, staring at the road shimmering in the heat, wondering if what she meant was really nothing at all. The rain came back that Friday, not the loud, angry kind, but slow and steady, the sort that fills the night with its own rhythm. I was closing up the shop when I saw headlights pause outside. Her car again. She stepped out carrying 2 takeout boxes, her trench coat pulled tight, hair damp at the ends. I thought you might not have eaten, she said, half apologetic. I didn't want to cook alone. Something in that sentence lingered, alone. We sat on the workbench, eating quietly from the boxes while rain ticked against the roof. The smell of fried rice mixed with motor oil and wet concrete. It should have felt strange. It didn't. You ever get tired of this place? She asked, glancing around at the clutter. Sometimes, I admitted. But it's predictable. Predictable's easier than people. She smiled at that, faintly. You're too young to sound so sure of that. Her tone was gentle, teasing, but her eyes were elsewhere. She was turning a soy sauce packet in her fingers, folding and unfolding it until it nearly tore. Is everything okay? I asked. Yeah, she said quickly. Then softer, no, not really. I didn't push. The air between us didn't need words. She looked tired, not in the physical sense, but the kind that seeps from too many held-back thoughts. When I offered her my jacket, she hesitated before taking it. The sleeves were too long on her, and she laughed when she noticed. You always were taller than you had any right to be. Guess I grew up, I said. Yeah, she murmured, eyes flicking up. You did. The rain grew heavier. The lights flickered once, twice. And for a moment, everything slowed, her hand brushing the sleeve, her breath close enough to warm the space between us. I don't know if she meant to move closer, or if I imagined it. But then her phone buzzed. She froze, glancing down at the screen, a man's name, half hidden by her thumb. She didn't answer, just stared at it until the call went silent. Work? I asked, pretending not to notice the shift in her face. She shook her head. No, just someone who doesn't know when to stop calling. Something cracked in her tone, the first sharp edge I'd ever heard from her. She set the phone face down, exhaling slowly. You don't have to explain, I said. I know, she whispered. The silence after that was almost unbearable. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent light, the faint clink of her ring against the metal bench. When she turned to look at me again, something in her expression had changed, soft, uncertain, searching. Do you ever feel? She began, then stopped, shaking her head. Never mind. What? It's nothing. She smiled, but it wasn't real, not this time. Her voice wavered when she spoke again. I should go. I stood as she gathered her bag, the rain still whispering outside. Our hands brushed when she handed me the empty box, not by accident this time. Her fingers lingered, then pulled away like a secret being taken back. "Good night," she said. But she didn't move right away. Just stood there in the doorway, eyes flicking to mine, one heartbeat too long. And then she left, the sound of her car fading into the rain. I stood alone under the hum of the lights, jacket still warm where her shoulders had been. She almost said something. I almost did too. She came to the shop again, this time on a Sunday, when the place was closed. I'd left the back door unlocked, maybe without realizing it. Maybe not. Either way, when I turned and saw her standing there, holding a thermos in both hands like an apology, I didn't ask why. "Coffee," she said quietly. "The good kind. Thought you might need it." I wiped my hands on a rag, trying to steady something inside me that wasn't ready to be steady. "You keep finding excuses to feed me." She smiled faintly. "You keep letting me." The silence after that was heavier than usual, not cold, but filled with everything we hadn't said. The light from the small window stretched between us, catching the dust in the air, the lines around her eyes, the faint tremor in my hands. I poured the coffee, and she leaned against the counter, her gaze drifting around the room like she needed to look at anything but me. "You're quiet today," she said. "So are you." She nodded, a small laugh escaping her. "Guess we're both bad at pretending lately." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The way she said it, soft, tired, honest, it scraped at something raw in me. She set her thermos down. "I shouldn't be here." "You've said that before." "I mean it this time." "Then why are you?" Her mouth opened, closed. She stared down at her hands, the tips of her fingers brushing the counter like she was tracing invisible words. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." The room felt too small for the truth in her voice. I stepped closer without meaning to, just enough that I could smell the faint hint of rain still clinging to her coat. "You don't have to explain anything to me." She shook her head. "That's the problem. I think I do. I think I've been trying to explain things to myself and failing miserably." She looked up then, really looked, and I swear I forgot how to breathe for a second. There was no defense in her eyes anymore, no distance, just confusion, exhaustion, and something painfully human. "Marina," I began, but my voice caught halfway. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't say my name like that." We stood there in silence, the hum of the old refrigerator the only sound between us. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my fingertips. Every word I didn't say crowded the air. She took a breath, steady but trembling. "What are we doing?" I didn't know how to answer. Maybe there wasn't one. Her eyes searched mine for something. Reason, relief, an anchor, but all she found was reflection. Two people standing too close, trying too hard to make sense of something that didn't fit into words. Finally, she stepped back, her face composed again, but her voice barely holding. "This, whatever this is, it can't keep happening." I nodded. "I know." But neither of us moved. The coffee between us had gone cold. When she finally spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. "You make it too easy to forget how lonely I am." And then she turned and walked out, leaving her thermos behind, still warm from her hands. For 2 weeks, she didn't come by. I tried not to count the days, but every evening I found myself glancing at the door before locking it, like habit had turned into hope without my consent. The silence felt heavier now, thick with everything left unsaid. Then one evening, as I was wiping grease off my hands, I saw her car pull up. No smile this time. No coffee. Just a manila envelope clutched to her chest. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, wordless. She placed the envelope on the counter and hesitated before sliding it toward me. Inside were a few photographs, old, worn at the edges. One showed her standing with a man I didn't recognize, his arm wrapped casually around her waist. Another was taken years ago. She looked younger, freer somehow. And then there was one more. Me, maybe 15, awkward and grinning at some long-forgotten family barbecue. She was in the background, watching me. I looked up, confused. "What is this?" She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for years. "He passed away last year," she said, tapping the photo of the man. We weren't together anymore, but he was someone who used to understand me. I didn't know what to say. The honesty in her tone didn't need comfort. It just needed space. I found these while packing up some boxes, she continued. I thought about throwing them away, but then I saw that one. Her finger brushed the photo of me, and I realized I'd been keeping certain memories without realizing it. My throat tightened. Why show me this? Because I keep wondering if I'm doing it again, she whispered, holding on to something I shouldn't. The words hit deeper than they should have. The air between us changed, not electric this time, but raw, unguarded. I didn't mean to confuse things, I said quietly. I never wanted. I know, she interrupted, voice trembling. But you remind me of him sometimes. The way you listen, the quiet, the sincerity. She laughed softly, bitterly. He stopped looking at me that way a long time before we ended. You. She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. Me what? I asked. She shook her head. You make it feel like I'm still seen. That's all. Neither of us moved. The rain had started again outside. Light, hesitant. It filled the silence where words failed. She gathered the photos back into the envelope, but left one behind, the one of me at 15. Keep it, she said. I don't know why, but it feels right. I stared at the photo, the ghost of her smile in the background. You sure? She nodded. Some things belong to whoever remembers them hardest. Her voice wavered on the last word. And before I could speak, she was already halfway to the door, her reflection caught for a moment in the window, a blur of rain and regret. Marina, I called softly. She paused. I'm not him. I know, she said, not turning around. That's what makes this harder. And then she was gone. The envelope pressed to her chest like a secret she wasn't ready to let go of. It happened without a plan, without meaning to, or maybe because meaning had nothing to do with it anymore. A small family gathering. Late evening. The kind that stretches too long with polite laughter and the same stories recycled for years. I hadn't seen her since the night of the photographs. She sat near the window, distant but composed, her wine untouched. Our eyes met once, brief, cautious. Then again, when everyone else was talking. Later, when most had gone, I stepped outside for air. The backyard was quiet, lit by a single bulb that swung gently in the wind. She was already there, arms crossed, looking out at the dark garden. I was wondering if you'd come out, she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. I needed to breathe. Me too. We stood there, side by side, the sound of crickets filling the silence. The smell of cut grass and fading rain hung between us. For once, the quiet didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like surrender. After a while, she spoke. I keep trying to make sense of this. So do I. And I stopped. She gave a small, uneven laugh. That sounds like something you'd say. I don't want to keep pretending it's nothing, I said, my voice low. But I also don't want to ruin whatever this is by trying to name it. She turned to me then, really turned. Her eyes looked softer in the half-light, tired but peaceful. You make it sound simple. It isn't. She nodded slowly, her hand brushing her arm as if trying to warm herself. The gesture was small, but something in it, the fragility, the restraint, made me step closer. I don't want to hurt you, she said quietly. You have your whole life ahead of you. And me? She trailed off, shaking her head. I've already made enough mistakes. You're not one, I said. She looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that feels like it could undo years of careful distance. I don't know what this is, she whispered, but it feels real. I didn't answer. Words would have only made it smaller. So I did what I'd wanted to do for weeks. I reached out, just enough for my fingers to graze hers. Not holding, just touching, skin against skin, quiet proof. She didn't pull away. The night hummed around us, soft wind, the faint hum of traffic far off, someone's laughter drifting from inside. She leaned slightly toward me, her shoulder brushing mine. We stayed like that, both of us looking straight ahead, breathing in sync without meaning to. There was no confession, no promise, just an understanding, fragile, temporary, real. After a long silence, she whispered, "We can't stay here forever." I know, but neither of us moved. Her hand was still in mine, still warm. And for the first time, that was enough. The light above us flickered once, then steadied, as if deciding to stay on just a little longer. It's been almost a year since that night in the garden. Sometimes I still catch myself glancing at the back door, expecting her to walk through. Trench coat, tired smile, that quiet kind of warmth that always seemed to fill the air before she even spoke. But she doesn't come anymore. Not to the shop, not to the gatherings. She moved to another city, closer to her work, farther from whatever this was. And yet, she's everywhere. In the smell of fresh coffee that still reminds me of the thermos she left behind. In the way I paused before saying something honest, remembering how she'd hold silence until it meant something. In the sound of rain hitting the roof, slow, patient, familiar. People think distance ends a connection. It doesn't. It just makes it quieter. I fix engines now with more care than before. I listen longer. I talk less. Maybe because I learned something about what it means to be seen and how rare it is. She once said I made it too easy for her to forget how lonely she was. The truth is, she made it harder for me to stay comfortable in mine. That's what she gave me. Not love in the storybook sense, not promises or forever, but a kind of understanding that changed how I see people, how I listen, how I forgive. Sometimes, when I'm closing the shop at night, I take out the photo she left behind, the one where I'm 15, and she's standing in the background, half smiling at something I can't remember. I used to think the picture was about me, about how young I looked, how much has changed since then. Now I realize it's about her, about how quietly she carried her own storms. She once asked me, "What are we doing?" I still don't have an answer. Maybe we were two people caught between timing and truth, both too afraid to ruin the fragile thing that made us feel human again. But maybe that's all love is sometimes, the brief crossing of two lonely paths, where both walk away seeing the world a little differently. Last month, she sent me a postcard. No return address. Just a photograph of the sea and 5 words written in her careful handwriting. "It's quieter here. Thank you." I didn't write back. Didn't need to. Because some stories don't need sequels. Some just need remembering. When I lock up now, the shop feels lighter. The silence doesn't ache, it breathes. I think that's how you know something mattered, when it leaves you gentler than it found you. And maybe that's what I'd ask anyone who's ever had a story like ours. The kind that doesn't fit into right or wrong, that lives in pauses and half smiles. Have you ever met someone who changed you quietly, without meaning to?